days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Love these episodes. We're going to go upon further review and talk about what I saw when I broke down the film. Of course, all 22 film breakdowns are available over on Patreon, 49ers Cutback Patreon. You can find that link in the description section, and I go play by play through the game and break down each play, how each player's doing, the technique involved, if they do something wrong going through it. And that's an extensive breakdown, many hours. If you want to get into that stuff, you can. If you don't, I completely understand as well. But I have a little bit of an overview here where I'm going to talk about some of the things I saw. I'm going to put a focus on some of the offensive and defensive linemen in this episode. Of course, I'm going to still talk about some of the other positions, but there were some things that came out of this game, some question marks that people had. You know, people were saying certain players played really bad or certain players played really good. And I think sometimes the eye test, when you first watch it live in that game view, it might give you one opinion, or maybe you see one play that's really good or really bad, and it kind of changes the way you look at the rest of the game. A really bad play might leave you with a bad taste in your mouth for a particular player. Then when you go back and you watch play-by-play and see how they played during the game, like, you know what? Actually, I need to walk that back a little bit. The guy did pretty good. Happens to us all. You can look at a game in several different views and have a different opinion on it. And when everything's going on, especially in a game like football, if you're watching the ball, you're usually missing what's going on around the rest of the play. One of the things that was toughest to train to do when I became a coach was to watch my position only. Doing that and not following the ball is very difficult, especially when you start in at coaching offensive line and all the fun stuff's happening with the ball in the hands of the quarterback or the running back or the wide receiver, and you're watching five guys trying to make sure that they block and do things accordingly. So it's always understandable when you come out of a game with one opinion. So I like to look at the film and see if it reaffirms what I thought, and it's like, yep, that's exactly what happened, or if it gives me a reason to kind of look back and change my mind. So we're going to do that. But I also want to look at a couple of things for this week. You know, one of those things being what the schedule looks like for the 49ers. They're preparing for their last preseason game against the Chargers. We're going to talk about that. A little bit Brandon Aiyuk news. And then also 49ers may be interested in targeting a couple of positions through trade. We know the John Mechie trade, the 49ers were in on it, according to Jordan Schultz and others, that they were in, and they got outbid by the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles, sent a tight end to Houston Texans. They did some pick swaps, and they got it done. And the 49ers missed out on an opportunity to get a young player who really hasn't excelled in the NFL, hasn't reached full potential, but coming out of Alabama, he was definitely a guy I love for the 49ers, love for the system. And he's been playing in the system in Houston. So it would have been interesting to see. Houston went really big with wide receivers in the draft. So we'll talk about that just a little bit. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating if you feel like I deserve it. And of course, FanDuel is the place you want to be if you want to get involved in betting during the season. The 49ers are favored right now to win the West at plus 160. They're a team that, a lot of people are counting on. If you want to see the 49ers win the Super Bowl, they are a 1-19 favorite, or 19-1 favorite. So you can put it on that. So all that's available on FanDuel. They also have player props. Bet on Christian McCaffrey to get over 950.5 yards this season. Bet on Brock Purdy, to throw for over 3,800 or 3,600 yards this season. Lots of cool stuff. Check out FanDuel. It's available. So when it comes to practice, I'm just going to quick overview it. Today will be the first day of practice for the San Francisco 49ers. They practice at 11:45 a.m. And following practice, Kyle Shanahan is going to speak to the media. And this is where we're going to get some of those injury updates and some real big information on key players, maybe more info on Dominic Pooney. So that's going to be something that happens. So if you're watching this and it's past 11:45 a.m. Pacific, that has probably already come out. So you probably know what's going on with that. Now, of course, Wednesday, they're going to have practice. Saul is going to talk to the media. Thursday, practice. Boyer talks to the media. And then Friday, no practice. They're going to do walkthroughs, no media availability. And then Saturday, of course, the game versus the Los Angeles Chargers. So that's going to be coming up, and that is really going to be a lot of fun to see some of these guys compete to try to win a roster spot. Now, one of the interesting developments that came out, and I don't know how many of you have saw this, but Brandon Aiyuk was going through some wide receiver route running with Brock Purdy and other quarterbacks out at Allegiant Stadium. Before the game, he was running routes, looking pretty good, looking pretty clean as he's getting to certain parts. He looked like further along than I expected him to look. So things were good, and that was trending in the positive direction. It was getting posted all over social media. Well, Matt Miyoko reported that the San Francisco 49ers may be facing fines. Fines may be levied towards the 49ers because Brandon Aiyuk is on PUP list. And when you're on PUP list, you're not allowed to run routes or do any sort of practice involved. And it's probably a non-story except for the fines, but it's just something that's going to come up that we had to mention. Now, I look at this in a different way. I know it's probably going to cost Jed York some money. He's going to have to open his checkbook, and Kyle Shanahan doesn't like that, having like egg on his face about the fact they get fined. Right, the Deommodore Lenoir thing was very frustrating for Kyle Shanahan when Lenoir was a rookie, and he locked everybody up, and then he had a little bit of a issue when they got fined because that film got put online. Well, I thought that for morale reasons, it was phenomenal. Getting to see Brandon Aiyuk out there running routes and looking pretty good. I mean, it wasn't like full speed, full go, ripping it in and out of his breaks, but it was pretty good speed. Brandon Aiyuk is looking like he's trending in the right direction, and that means that he's on track for what Kyle Shanahan said. Week 6 to week 10, like that area, I think is really good for Brandon Aiyuk to come back. So positive news. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. There's a couple of films of him going through stretches, going through some routes. You just get the feels of Brandon Aiyuk potentially coming back. We know how dynamic that's going to be for this offense. Aiyuk, Pearsall, Jawan, Demarcus Robinson. Then it becomes a formidable wide receiver room. Just thought it was interesting. And then the last one is, in Rappaport, says that the 49ers are calling about wide receiver and offensive linemen. And I think wide receiver makes a lot of sense with the John Mechie news. They are definitely looking for some depth at wide receiver. The impending suspension of Demarcus Robinson, the injury concerns about Jawan Jennings, Brandon Aiyuk not going to be back till the middle of the season. You need to probably have another wide receiver that's dynamic, that fits in your system. And so I don't think they're just looking for anybody. They're looking for the right somebody. And so John Mechie made a lot of sense because he was young, he was fast, he fit the system, he understood it already, and could get in there and already had the calluses of training camp. So it's going to be interesting to see what the 49ers decide to do when it comes to wide receiver. But I thought the most interesting part of it was them looking for an offensive lineman. And the reason I say that is my breakdown of this game film. I did a lot of focus on offensive line and defensive line, but offensive line has become a point of contention. Everybody's talking about it because they have real question marks. And I think after week 1, everyone was looking at Connor Kobe and Drew Moss and saying, hey, look, these guys are eventual players for this football team. And, they gave Connor Kobe a start. So the 49ers looking around the league, I think, is an interesting development because I think that's a recognition by the 49ers that they don't have the necessary tools in-house, potentially, when it comes to offensive line. And I think that once we go through this breakdown and we talk about what I saw upon further review, I think it's going to be clear that that's probably the necessary steps that they need to make. It's not that the 49ers are void of talent because, they are looking pretty good when it comes to talent, but they have some young talent that's not ready to contribute yet. And so they might need to go and find somebody that maybe wouldn't start for another team, but maybe could end up being a really good depth piece here. And so I think that they have some concerns, especially when it comes to offensive tackle, depending on when Ben Barch is going to be available. Maybe they have concerns about left guard. And so they're taking a look. They're taking a gander to see what's out there. And I think this is something that they probably have to do after 2 weeks of watching their preseason games. They need an improvement in offensive line. And it could be that they need a improvement along, the interior part. Now, Dominic Pooney, they said, is going to be out a few weeks. Is that still ringing true? We're going to find out. Kyle Shanahan, once he lets us know, we'll have a good idea. If Pooney's going to miss into the regular season, well, then they definitely need to figure this thing out. I don't know if you can go into the season with Nick Zakel, or Connor Kobe starting at offensive guard, or heaven forbid if Ben Barch is hurt too and Pooney's hurt, Nick Zakel and Connor Kobe, starting at guard. It's not that they're bad players, and it's not that they haven't proven that they've got some ability. It's just, are they frontline starters in this league right now? And I think that that's a question we're going to answer in this episode. But I think that's one of the things I'm interested in. Are the 49ers looking for an offensive tackle? What about Spencer Burford? Do they need another offensive tackle to take Austin Pleasant's place? Or is it interior offensive line? I think this is going to be interesting, a development over the next week or so. And of course, they could still make moves after the preseason games happen, and they can still pick up players who are cut by other teams. But offensive linemen and good offensive linemen are not normally cut. So it's going to be other positions you can usually pounce on with that. But let's talk about the film review. And before I get to the offensive line, I want to say this. Ricky Pearsall was really good in this game. And so I just want to give Ricky Pearsall a little bit of a shout out of how well he played. The route running was on point. He was blocking well. He was getting in and out of his breaks. Everything, the timing with Brock Purdy was on point. So Ricky Pearsall is looking very good. So we've been talking about wide receiver needs. You got Ricky Pearsall. And if you're going to have Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall, you've got a pretty good 1-2 punch to start the season. I think when it comes to question marks after that is what happens with Demarcus Robinson. How healthy is Jacob Cowing? Which veterans are you keeping between Chosen, Gage, and Hodgins? It just gets a little bit interesting. But Pearsall is answering questions. And I think by the end of this season, everyone is going to be saying Ricky Pearsall deserved to be a first-round draft pick when he got drafted out of Florida. And I think that that's been a question mark. Lots of people have said, hey, we really like Ricky Pearsall. He's a good wide receiver, but we had him in the second round, or we had him in the third round, and we don't feel like he was a first-round talent. We could add Cooper DeJean. I think after this season and what Ricky Pearsall is going to put on film and how he's going to impact this football team, that people are going to say Ricky Pearsall deserves to be a number one or first round draft pick. He deserved where he got picked. And I think that's going to be big. So let's get offensive line. Connor Kobe. And last week, I was definitely a fan of what he did against the Denver Broncos. And we talked about a little bit about the competition that he was playing against. He played, a lot of seconds, some third round pick, or some third level picks, third string guys. And I thought he did a pretty good job. He looked good. He was pass blocking well. He was run blocking, not consistently, but he was making some good run blocks here and there, hitting his landmarks, doing a good job. So I thought it was a really good first step for Connor Kobe. And then the question marks about what happens at left guard started ringing. And all of a sudden, Connor Kobe steps into this game, and not only is he getting more reps than he's ever gotten in the NFL, but he's getting first string starter reps at left guard. And I thought that it was very inconsistent for Connor Kobe. I thought that there were areas where he did pretty well. Pass protection wise, it wasn't bad. He struggled a little bit with the twists and the stunts up front, being able to disengage and then get back to his gap to cut things off when the guy looped inside. That was a little bit of a problem for him. I think his biggest problem was him struggling in the run game, be able to get off when they were getting a push. Him and his teammates are getting a push. They're trying to get that guy to move horizontally, and then one of them is going to work up once they have control to the second level. Connor Kobe wasn't able to disengage, and the Raiders were definitely holding. Defensive holding is a thing that's not called very much. It's even been a point of emphasis in years past, and he was getting held. But you have to learn to fight against it. You have to learn to, get out of those situations and still get to your block, to only be restricted but not constricted. And you've got to be able to fight through it and get there. And that was one of the problems with Connor Kobe in this game. These are not things that I'm saying make him a bad player. These are things I'm saying he needs to work on to be more consistent and be ready to start when his number's called to start for the 49ers. So I thought that Connor Kobe was a little bit up and down with his performance in this game. And I thought his run blocking was probably the most significant drop-off from the week before against the Broncos. And so I think that there's things to work on. Now, the good news is there's another game coming up this week against the Chargers. And if he can get better, that will be a good way to prove that he's capable of taking the next step. The good thing is when this stuff happens on film, now as a coach, you know what to work on. Now as a player, you see what you're struggling with, and you can go make it an emphasis for yourself during the week to work on it getting better, and when you get in the game to make it better. So Kobe's got to get a little bit better at that. It kind of echoes what Chris Foerster had said a couple weeks ago, and I think Kyle Shanahan actually had said it first, that Connor Kobe was a little bit better at pass blocking than run blocking. And that caught a lot of people by surprise, me included. But then you start to remember that run blocking in Kyle Shanahan's zone scheme is a lot more difficult than any of the zone schemes these guys play in. So, of course, he was going to have a little bit of issues. But it was good seeing him get some first-team reps playing against some tough interior defensive linemen. And I thought as far as like size and power and anchor and things like that, he was doing a pretty good job proving that he's got the body to play in the NFL. So there were definitely some good things to take away, just some constructive criticism about things he knows he needs to work on that he's going to get better at. Now, Drew Moss, I saw it last week, and then I saw it again this week. One of his biggest weaknesses, and this is not very much different from a guy like Aaron Banks, who's a mauler, is a little bit of lateral quickness. And when you get into pass rush sets, he struggles a little bit with the more faster interior defensive linemen that can beat him to the inside or to the outside. And that is one thing I've noticed about Drew Moss. If you square him up and you try to bull rush him, you're not going through Drew Moss. If you're in the run game and he squares you up and he gets his hands on your chest plate, you might be going in the dirt. The strength, the power, the balance, it's really good. But the lateral quickness is seeming to be a little bit of a problem for him. And some of the interior defensive linemen are taking advantage of that. Some swipes, some rips, some swims, and they're getting past him a little bit. So that is the area of weakness that he has, his lateral quickness right now. Can he improve it enough? Can he get squared up with these guys to be able to use his strengths, which is very strong hands. When he locks up, he's got you. The balance, the being able to stay on these guys, the anchor, those are things that he does really well. So that's the part of his game that he's going to have to work out. And I think it's not very much different from what Aaron Banks was in his rookie season, where he struggled with the faster defensive tackles like Maurice Hurst, guys that were quick and agile and can move and change direction. Those guys give him a little bit of problem. So through a couple of weeks now, we've seen what Connor Kobe's strengths and weaknesses are and what he's working on. And now we see also what Drew Moss's are. Now, a guy that was catching a lot of heat, and he pretty much catches heat every single week, is Nick Zakelj. And Nick Zakelj played 59 snaps in this football game, most of any 49er. So Zakelj was getting a lot of reps on offense, and that was most of any 49ers offensive player. And part of the reason was they played him at right guard. Dominic Pooney played the first series. Of course, he suffered the injury, but Nick Zakelj was always going to go in for series 2. He played all those guard reps, and then later in the game, the 49ers moved him to center. And there were some questions about why they moved him to center and put Drake Nugent at guard. And the easy answer for that is Chris Foerster knows he has to have a guard/center that's a backup. Right, you've had guys through the years, right? You had Ben Garland; he was a backup center/backup offensive guard. So you had him. You had John Feliciano just recently, backup center/offensive guard. Just last year, Nick Zakelj, Ben Bartch, backup center/offensive guard. You have to have that versatility with one of those guys that they can play center as well. So taking a hard look at Nick Zakelj, I think, is smart, looking at him as center, seeing if he can handle the role, but also taking a look at Drake Nugent. Drake Nugent's arms are really on the the threshold of whether he can play guard in the NFL and just taking a look at what he could possibly do. And he actually did pretty good. When you look at the numbers for Drake Nugent, he held up. And, PFF is not the best guide for everything when you're talking, play on the field. But I think sometimes it gives you kind of an idea. Now, he only played 20 snaps and he had a 67.9 grade, but that was one of the top 5 grades for the 49ers. And when you watch the film, Drake Nugent did better than anticipated. I thought this was one of Drake Nugent's better games that he's played, and he has played a little bit better this season than he played last year. So I got to give him credit for his improvement, but I thought it was nice to see that. Now, what I saw from Nick Zakelj that was good was I saw a player that was getting to the second level and making some of those blocks. He was getting out on the edge and making blocks. He was pass blocking pretty good. I thought that there were times he made mistakes, missed blocks, but I thought that they were less than they had been in the past, right? So before he would make a good block, maybe have a couple that were struggles, then make a good block. I thought in this one it was good block, bad block. What's crazy is there's on film, I'm breaking it down. He has one really good block where he gets to the second level, and I'm praising him. In the very next play, he ends up on the ground. It doesn't look good, and it's like, whew, that's kind of what you're going through. But I thought it was a little bit more consistent than we've seen in some other games. So I think that Nick Zakelj is still in the mix to be a backup offensive lineman for the 49ers. But question marks about him starting. If something is really wrong with Dominic Pooney and if something's really wrong with Ben Barch, I think the 49ers need to take a really hard look at two different things. Number one, moving Spencer Burford inside. And if you move Spencer Burford inside to start, that means you need a more accomplished offensive tackle, which they don't really have right now. Austin Pleasant, is a guy that I want to talk about. I want to talk about Isaiah Prince too. But I think that you just got to make a move there. It's either Burford goes inside and plays guard, or you leave him outside and you got to get another guard. Whether that's, somebody that's out there, Dalton Reisner, who's going around and meeting with teams he might sign anytime now, or, a retread, a guy who keeps talking about John Feliciano went on 95-7 the game, and he said, hey, I'm basically retired for 27, 28 teams. The other teams I'm available for. I'm working out. I'm in shape. 49ers are one of those teams that I would come back for. In fact, he said they're the number one team. And I know people don't want John Feliciano. Some people don't. But I think you take a hard look at it with some of the injury concerns you have on the offensive line. I think it wouldn't be a bad idea. Now, Pleasance and Prince. Austin Pleasance is really struggling. And his PFF number was definitely down. Isaiah Prince, same thing. Two of the guys who struggled the most over the last couple weeks. And I think that that's probably a big reason why the 49ers are looking around. I thought Spencer Burford reestablished himself as a player that could be a offensive tackle as far as a backup offensive tackle for the 49ers. But I thought Pleasance and Prince, they're not showing that they deserve to make this football team right now. Some inconsistencies with hands, standing a little bit tall. Pleasance is struggling a little bit when it comes to athleticism and making blocks. I think those guys are struggling a little bit. But I don't want to talk all about offense. I want to talk about defensive line too. Alfred Collins, Evan Anderson, Sebastian Valdez, Bruce Hector. Those are guys I'm going to talk about. Alfred Collins was catching so much heat because he got drove back. And there's a play where Alfred Collins, they get underneath him and they just absolutely walk him backwards. That can't happen, but it's going to happen when you have pad level like Alfred Collins that sometimes creep. Now, one thing that we've heard consistently from Tim Ryan on the telecast, if you're watching in the Bay Area, is that they know he's still trying to get in football shape, trying to get his legs underneath him. And when that happens, you start elevating. Your pads elevate as you're not quite there yet. So I've seen Chris Kasarik beat this into people's heads, and just Javon Kinlaw was one of those guys, just, fire out low, just hit the bag over and over. And I think Alfred Collins just needs some more work with that. But I don't think it was consistently bad. I think that there were moments that were bad. There were some moments that were decent. We're still not getting any explosion where he's getting off the ball and showing that athleticism that he has to be able to penetrate. Right now, he still stays around the line of scrimmage way too much. And I think that is because he still hasn't kicked what he ran in his previous scheme. He still got that in his head playing at Texas where you're at the line of scrimmage, you're two gapping, you're taking on multiple guys. and he hasn't got that out of his head, and he needs to start penetrating and be a guy that can be a disruptor. We haven't seen it yet. So Alfred Collins is a guy that's still developing, but I don't think it's all bad. And I'm not ready to say his stock is down. I did my stock up players yesterday. He's for sure not a stock up guy, but he's not a stock down guy either. And I think that we look at him and we just got to let him develop. I talked about this for a couple of weeks. Just let him breathe and let's see what happens. Let's see if he can make an improvement against the Chargers. But he's not ready to start. He's not. And I was hoping he was going to be able to start. That's not it. Kalia Davis, he's ready to start. Jordan Elliott, if he comes back from injury, we'll see. I think those guys will be the starting defensive tackles when the 49ers play Seattle. Now, Evan Anderson is an interesting one because he's been hurt and he comes back. And I think there was so much hype about Evan Anderson last year. Undrafted free agent, and a lot of people really were surprised when he didn't make the active 53-man roster. I wasn't surprised that he didn't make it. What I was surprised is when he got back from the practice squad, he did play a lot better than he had played, and I was impressed by that. He was able to stop the run a little bit more consistent, and he didn't really get moved. He was kind of around the line of scrimmage player like Alfred Collins is playing right now, except he didn't get moved very much. He couldn't generate pass rush, but that's not really what the 49ers wanted him for. They wanted him to be a guy that could stop the run, that wouldn't get moved against double teams. Well, he's getting moved, and the thing is, if you watched Alfred Collins and you came away from that game saying, you know what, Alfred Collins, your stock's down, you're getting moved a lot. You had to have the same opinion about what happened with Evan Anderson. And I'm kind of the same way with Alfred Collins as I am with Evan Anderson, where I feel like he's a young player that's still developing, but he's not 6'5" or 6'6" like Alfred Collins. He's a lot smaller. And so he's got to be able to stay underneath these guys. And I thought that he was getting moved a little bit easier than I had seen him in the past. And so that was a little bit concerning for me because he wasn't in midseason form. And maybe it's because he came off the injury. He's not quite there yet. There were some pass rush things I saw from him that I liked because that's been a concern, how he was going to pass rush. But I thought that he showed a couple of things there. But I think Evan Anderson's in a position where he's really got to work hard. Really got to work hard to be able to make this football team. I think he's a fringe guy right now. And I know a lot of people have had him as a lock, and there's injuries along the defensive line. But you got Alfred Collins and CJ West that play one tech. You might need somebody that's more of a three-tech style guy like Sebastian Valdez, who also struggled a little bit getting washed in the run game, getting just completely, wiped down. And so I think he's ahead of Valdez is ahead of Evan Anderson right now. I think he's playing a little bit better. Seeing his eyes are a little bit better, finding the quarterback, locating the runner, kind of, more athletic, even though he's really big, not as big as Evan Anderson. But I think that right now he's a different kind of player that you could sprinkle in. That's a close battle. Two undrafted free agents, Evan Anderson last year, Sebastian Valdez this year, I think in competition. I thought his play wasn't as good as the Denver Broncos, but I won't say it's bad. And I'm not saying that about any of these guys. There's just there's plays that are just not as good as you're expecting, right? It's that criticism, it's that coaching points of, hey, we could do this better. And for Evan Anderson, you can't get pushed back when you're supposed to have the low man wins mentality because you are, 5'11", 6 foot. No one should be getting underneath you. You should not be getting pushed back in double teams. That is the exact reason you're on this football team, is to win those. And so that's an element I want him to get better at. And for Valdez, the same thing. You can't get washed by one guy down the line of scrimmage. You got to hold your ground. Yes, you got to move with the zone, but you don't want to get completely pushed out and create open avenues and holes. So a little bit of concern there. Now, one defensive lineman that's caught my attention in a positive direction, and it's not all consistent, but is Bruce Hector. And I know he's been in the league for a while, but he's a lot of fun to watch kind of rush the passer and be able to generate pressure. And he gets off the ball pretty quickly. I don't think he's going to make this 53-man roster, but I think he could be a veteran, the 49ers stash on the practice squad in case they need him, because I think he is a scheme fit. And I see some things when it comes to long arm and handwork and things like that he does well. Now, he doesn't play like a big, right, like Alfred Collins or CJ West or Evan Anderson. He's kind of more in that three-tech type role, not an elite pass rusher, not elite speed, but he's a guy that can definitely move laterally, uses a pretty good straight arm, a long arm. I think he's got a little bit of potential to play. And then I really wanted to watch Jacob Robinson in this game because Jacob Robinson has not had his number called pretty much at all during the preseason. And a lot of times when that happens, that's a good thing. Now, you're not going to get on anyone's radar if you're not having anything go your way. You don't have any pass defenses. You don't have any interceptions. You don't have any, tackles. Really, nothing's going your direction. But as a coach, you look at it as they're not even targeting Jacob Robinson. He's not having to make plays on the football. He's just doing everything right. And when that happens, you start taking notice that it's quiet over there for a reason. And so number 49, Jacob Robinson, is going to be somebody interesting to watch during the Chargers game. I hope that the Chargers challenge him a little bit, but we can see this guy out there making some plays. We've seen all kinds of plays from Chase Lucas. We've seen, other guys that have moved to safety like Derek Canteen making plays. We've seen this week Saron Neal making some plays, but they're not trying Jacob Robinson. And I watched the film. He's got really good coverage is part of the reason. And we're not talking about him because usually you only talk about guys that make plays. But as a coach, I know in the past, you like when guys don't get, get, a lot of things going their way because they're doing a good job. One of the things I think all offensive linemen really hate the most is the fact that the only time that they are talked about is when they miss a block. And so that's one of the funny things is sometimes when you're not talked about, it's a good thing. Offensive linemen, defensive backs, right? Guys who you really don't want the ball going your direction as defensive backs. If we don't talk about you, you must be doing something right. So that's something to remember. But I want to watch Jacob Robinson. I think he's going to do a pretty good job. So, that's what I was talking about today upon further review. If there's other things you guys want me to talk about, other players, let me know in the comment section down below. Of course, the all 22 breakdowns are available on Patreon, and that's 49ers Cutback /Patreon. Go sign up. There's 3 different tiers that you can sign up for. Go check it out, and you can see what is available. And, check out Patreon. And if you don't want to, you don't have to. You can stay right here on YouTube and watch the videos or check it out on, Believe Network audio platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. It's all available for you. So really appreciate everyone coming through. It means a lot. Of course, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. If you're going to bet with FanDuel. And catch you guys on the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.